Seattle Seahawks match the Jacksonville Jaguars offer sheet for wide receiver Jake Bobo. So on today's show, I figured we could discuss some potential free agent wide receiver targets that James Gladstone could potentially look at now that we're into week 3 of NFL free agency, which is kind of crazy to say out loud. This is Jags Now, presented by Chat Sports. I'm your host, Cullen Brown, and I've got a challenge for you guys. For this month, we have had a great month here trying to grow the channel, but I really want to try to improve our likes on a given video. I went back and looked, and throughout the month of March, the most liked video that we had reached 178 likes, and we greatly appreciate the support here. But can we top it today? Can we reach that 200 like mark? Let me know if you guys want more Jags videos kind of like this by hitting that like button. It helps us grow the community here, and it helps this video get out to more people that want to know more about the Jacksonville Jaguars. It's free to support, and we'd greatly appreciate it. Okay, so before we kind of get into the nuts and bolts in terms of the wide receivers that we are going to be discussing on today's show that I do think are realistic, I wanted to just talk about the big name wide receivers that, for one reason or another, whether they're out of the price range or I just think that I don't see them potentially landing in Jacksonville for kind of numerous reasons. I just wanted to discuss these guys first. Juwan Jennings, I think he's simply going to be priced out. Although he hasn't signed with the team yet during NFL free agency, I do think that the Jags just aren't going to have the cap space to sign a guy like Juwan Jennings who's looking to cash out during this NFL free agency period. Same with Deebo Samuel. I think he's really talented and be really interested into seeing what he could look like in a Liam Coen offense, but I don't think he is somebody that Jacksonville will look to target. Tyreek Hill, somebody that the Jags want somebody to contribute next season. And, given the nasty, gruesome injury that he suffered during last season, I'm not sure how much he is, if at all, going to compete in 2026. So I don't think the Jaguars will look to target Tyreek Hill. Stephon Diggs, he's got obviously some baggage there with some off-the-field stuff. I just think that he's going to be more or less suited in line for, if he does sign with another team here shortly, somebody that, A, is going to pay him more and, B, have a more prominent role than what the Jaguars would offer him. And Keenan Allen's kind of made it known that he prefers to play on the West Coast, and I do think he would also be out of the Jaguars' price range. So those are just 5 guys that, yes, they are free agents as of this current moment, but I don't see the Jaguars potentially pursuing after they missed out on Jake Bobo. And you guys might be wondering, all right, well, what is the cap space for the Jacksonville Jaguars at this current moment? Well, as you know, Spotrac and Over the Cap, they can never just seem to agree on where the cap space is for any given team. So I figure I'd state them both just for those who are concerned or just, wanted to know. Spotrac has the Jaguars at $6.8 million in cap space, whereas Over the Cap is 5.9. Regardless, about 6 or 7, funny amount of cap space there for the Jacksonville Jaguars. So that is where we currently stand. So we're going to look at some kind of free agent wide receiver options that are more on the budget side. Not only that, but, when you obviously have your kind of top 3 set in Jacksonville, plus the 4th and kind of a situational role in Travis Hunter, some kind of guys that you can get in as veterans that could add to this wide receiver room one way or another. And I think the most likely free agent option is simply bringing back Tim Patrick, who I thought did a really, nice job in terms of being a mentor and a leader for this Jacksonville wide receiver room this past season. And he really was a guy that, you look at his numbers, he's not going to blow you off the screen in terms of his production, but that's not truly the value that Tim Patrick brought. Yes, he's a big body wide receiver that can contribute in the run blocking game, and he truly was somebody that I thought fit well into what Liam Coen was trying to do in Jacksonville. But as I mentioned, statistically, he's not in his prime in terms of the receiver that he once was, for the Denver Broncos, for example. He's a guy that leads by mentorship and just being a guy that guys can lean on in that locker room. And Liam Coen, whenever the Jaguars did sign him, talked about Tim Patrick back in August of 2025 before last season. And I thought this was a really kind of interesting quote into kind of the mindset that Coen had on Patrick, leading into that season and what he kind of envisioned Patrick's role being for the Jacksonville Jaguars. This is what Liam Coen had to say. It's pretty obvious, both mentally and physically. So that was kind of what went into the direction, was getting a bigger type body guy that can give us quality snaps and a guy that he's physically played a lot of football in the NFL. He's had a lot of success and brings veteran maturity coming from a successful organization and has a lot of personal perseverance in the last few years to get where he's at. And I consider Tim Patrick getting re-signed by the Jacksonville Jaguars as the most likely option in terms of all the free agent options out there. Jake Bobo would have provided something interesting in terms of like being that kind of bigger body that Liam Coen alluded to with Tim Patrick, but I do think that Patrick now, being in the system, for, over a season now, there's that familiarity there. I don't think he's going to cost too much. He just makes a lot of sense for the Jaguars to re-sign. But That's not what you guys came to the video for, so let's get into some targets externally that the Jaguars could look to add this offseason. Starting with a guy in Sterling Shepard. And you might be sitting there kind of puzzling by this pick. I thought Sterling Shepard over, his entire really NFL career has been a solid, steady wide receiver option for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Now, he's not the physically imposing wide receiver that even a Tim Patrick is. Not that Tim Patrick's like this some menacing 6'5" receiver, but Sterling Shepard's a pure slot receiver who last season for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, whenever Mike Evans went down with injury and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers were kind of, leaning on, younger receivers to kind of pair with Baker Mayfield kind of throughout the season. I thought Sterling Shepard just not over the course of the year, but just overall had solid moments kind of throughout, the season last year for Tampa Bay. I mean, Emeka Buka wasn't quite ready, I think, as the season progressed, was ready to lead that Tampa Bay Buccaneers offense into being that wide receiver one. They kind of leaned on some of the veterans and Sterling Shepard eventually when Chris Godwin kind of came back. Would the Jaguars potentially look at Sterling Shepard, who's had a really nice career? I think he's played about 10 seasons in the NFL. He's 33 years old. He's been around the league, and just could be a reliable kind of slot option for Trevor Lawrence in this offense if the Jaguars, for whatever reason, were to go down a receiver or two, which hopefully, obviously, that doesn't happen. But I think Sterling Shepard would provide a lot of interesting value as an NFL veteran at this stage of his career. Would he also potentially look to go back to Tampa, obviously, after they lost Mike Evans? I'm not sure. But either way, I consider him a potential Jaguars free agent option. Along with somebody that I think could also be interesting for Jacksonville, Brandin Cooks. Man, it feels like he has been traded more than any other player, at least in my lifetime, during his tenure during the NFL. And, obviously, Jaguars fans remember him from the playoff game last year against the Buffalo Bills. And he's somebody that, obviously got released by the New Orleans Saints, then, was moved to the Buffalo Bills, and didn't really have a productive season last year. I'm not going to try to sell you that he's, the 1,000-yard Mr. Consistent receiver that people were to lean on at this stage of his career. That's not the kind of Brandin Cooks that you're getting at. But again, somebody that's been there, been in a lot of big games. He was obviously in that infamous Super Bowl with the New England Patriots. He's played with numerous kind of offensive minds. He's somebody that I consider a really smart wide receiver that could, adapt to Liam Cohen's offense and really be somebody that I think would fit into what the culture that the Jaguars are trying to build in, into 2026 and beyond. And I think with Brandin Cooks, again, you're not asking him to be that 1,000-yard receiver that he's been in the past. At 32 years old, you're more or less just like, hey, somebody, guys that can lean on, ask for advice, just give little like nuances, little just tidbits of knowledge that he's learned from his NFL career, pass it down to some of the younger guys, and Brian Thomas Jr., Parker Washington, and even Travis Hunter to a lesser extent. So I think Brandin Cooks would be an interesting option for the Jacksonville Jaguars. If the Jaguars do make a move and they do sign a wide receiver, or if they make a trade or any of the case, we'll make a video here on the channel. We've got two more free agent targets that I think we're going to go over here in a second, but if the Jaguars make a move, we will make a video here on the channel. Make sure you guys turn on your notifications so you never miss out here at Jags Now. If the Jaguars are doing something, we are here at Jags Now as well. Hit that subscribe button for Jacksonville Jaguars coverage all year long. Now, getting back to, because obviously with Sterling Shepard and Brandin Cooks, they've kind of fit more of that veteran mold in terms of, the experience and leaning on them, given the success throughout the career that they've had. Noah Brown is probably more of a bigger body receiver that could fit that wide receiver 4 or 5 role. And throughout his career, he's been really productive. Whether it was his time in Dallas, where he had, 500 yards back in 2022, in Houston that one season with the Texans, had over 500 yards as well. And in Washington, he's just kind of had his moments where, he looked really good in 2024, looked like that kind of consistent wide receiver 4 type that could give teams a potential, different kind of view. But last season, he dealt with numerous injuries. I think he dealt with like a knee, a groin injury, a rib injury, and was limited to only 4 games. He's not coming off the healthiest season, but at age 30, he's 6'2", 215 pounds, always been known as a guy that, can buy into a wide receiver room and do those little things that Liam Coen and the Jaguars offense potentially could need him to do. And I think the Jaguars could get him at a discount. I mean, you see, we're providing all the Spotrac market values per average annual value there down at the bottom of your screen. $1.9 million per year for Noah Brown. I'd take that. I mean, you're willing to give Jake Bobo 2 years, at $5.5 million. Noah Brown, I think that'd be a solid value if you're able to get him at $1.9 million per season. And, if you give him to a little 1 to 2 year contract, I think you provide value into this Jags wide receiver depth chart along the guys we've already previously mentioned. Getting down to our final free agent wide receiver option, and this is obviously going to be the biggest name, and I was kind of saving it for last because I don't consider this a likely option, but he's somebody that I think fits the Jaguars' kind of cap threshold in terms of what he could potentially play for. The question is, would DeAndre Hopkins be potentially a Jaguars free agent target? And it's kind of amazing that DeAndre Hopkins has been in the league for so long. Obviously, Jags fans are very familiar with his time in Houston, but Baltimore Ravens last year, given his age and everything, still put up over 300 yards, 2 touchdowns, 15 yards per catch, was situationally somebody that, you can trust one-on-one in a certain situation, and he can still win those contested 50-50 balls at a pretty decent rate. He's 6'1", 212 pounds. Again, he's 33 years old. You're not getting prime Nuke Hopkins here, but he is somebody that I really like in terms of being able to, if he's, which I think he has with his time in Baltimore, accepted that role in terms of, being a leader and being somebody that's more of an example versus, hey, is this guy going to be a consistent wide receiver 3 for you? Because I think at Baltimore at times they were trying to rely on him too much. I think if he sits there and buys into that kind of veteran role that a lot of these other receivers I'm sure will buy into, he could be a really valuable to the Jaguars depth chart. I just don't know if DeAndre Hopkins would sit there and accept being a wide receiver 4 or 5 in Jacksonville, but you never know. He is a free agent, and his average annual value per Spotrac, $1.4 million, which is kind of crazy to say, but, I mean, he is not the same player that he once was. I still think that there's a lot of value that DeAndre Hopkins could give to the game of the National Football League. Those are 5 wide receiver options that I think the Jacksonville Jaguars could sign during NFL free agency. I want you guys to get down in the comments section below and just let me know, which wide receiver would you sign? Would you sign Tim Patrick, bring him back? Would you sign Sterling Shepard, Brandin Cooks, Noah Brown, or DeAndre Hopkins? You comment those names down below, whichever one that you prefer, and I will react to them down below. And also, again, make sure to hit that like button. We are trying to get 200 likes here on this Jags Now video presented by Chat Sports. So make sure that you guys got us locked in, and make sure you also hit that subscribe button for Jags videos all off season long. And until next time, Jags fans, we'll see you on the next one.